I was chatting and I was saying, hey, like, how are things going? Blah, 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 blah. He's like, Google's saying we're killing it right now. I was like, it's not saying that in the bank. Like, I am not seeing any of these sales that you're telling me that you see. And I went away for TNC because this was for a campaign to sell the recording. So I was like incommunicado, to which $100,000 in ad spend was spent over those 3 days that I was incommunicado, because they were using the Google algorithm to optimize through these things that never actually existed, which means it's just getting more people who are less likely to convert. And it was a mess. It was like a complete $100,000 mess because people just relied on like what one thing was saying. There is no single truth except for what's in the bank. Okay, so there's no single truth in data. Are you seeing these things come through? And always think, trust but verify. Always, always, always. That's why this whole attribution debate just seems nonsensical to me. And it just sounds like a lot of people who are really bored right now, who are trying to justify their positions in something.
I wish we were in the same time zone. I would start drinking now too. But it's like 9:55 a.m. right now in Sydney. Oh, sorry, like in Australia.
When's that stopped you before? But
yeah, well, hey, listen. Usually when I'm seeing you, it's at a conference, and it doesn't stop me then. Because really, because I'm like, well, in Sydney it's this time right now, so that's fine. Normally at that time. How you been, bro?
I've been good. I've been just same old stuff, kind of down in Austin. Bought a boat. That's fun. Like that's been super fun. Been seeing the same girl for a while. Been together almost 2 years now, so that's kind of cool.
Congrats.
Thanks. Yeah. Level of consistency there, which is good.
Yeah, that's good. That's I know how important that is. That's for sure.
Definitely.
And
how about you?
how's the? Hey, yeah, I'm good. This whole world is upside down right now, and we're just we're just doing the best we can, like in chaotic situations. There's opportunities in there. There's lots of challenges in there. There's lots of challenges, especially around just being kind of stuck at home. Like we haven't gone back into the office yet. We've changed.
We're done for the year. We haven't gone to we're not going to be in the office for at least the rest of the. We declared we're a remote first company now, but we have the office lease for another 2 years. So it's like that.
So we're also like that's the same thing that we've done. So we've changed our approach now as well, and so we are also a remote first company. We just signed up to WeWork, and so now we're just basically just kind of like embracing the full the option to go somewhere if you want, but not the requirement, and so there's still a lot of collaboration that happens side by side, right? Where you just don't get that just being on kind of back to back. Zoom is great, but Zoom is just not the same as being side by side with someone.
Zoom fatigue's a real thing. Like I remember, because I worked remotely forever before I moved down to Texas, and I remember also like not just from a working perspective, but even like when you're doing like a stage presentation versus like a webinar. A webinar is far more draining because you have to build up all that energy still, and like when you don't have all kind of like the standard kind of like in the room with somebody to collaborate on, like Zoom fatigue is absolutely real because you have to keep yourself like, hey, how's it going?
And then you turn off Zoom and you're like, that's right, I'm just here again at home, you know?
And the shift, it's almost like if you were downshifting like a manual, like, and just going like all the way. It's an interesting turn. Not a terribly big fan of it, but.
No, not a terribly big fan of it either. But hey, let me just do a quick intro because look, I started recording. This is probably going to be we'll probably have started the podcast just from a few minutes back when I said I wasn't going to be drinking because it's too early, and then you judged me. So that's a good place to start. But today we're talking with Justin Rondeau, who's a marketer, conversion expert, speaker, and head of technology and operations at DigitalMarketer.com, which is basically one of the leading companies across the digital education space. And I first met Justin, and I had to have a look at this. This is back in 2014 at the Which Test One conference in Austin, Texas. I was there with Duncan, and we were there for the pre-show conferences. And we heard you talk about conversion optimization, and you just kind of opened up to us kind of the thinking just behind the volume to the quality game, and you kind of changed our whole approach. And so we came up to you afterwards and we were like, mate, that was so good. Do you want to have a drink? And that's when we hit it off, because you were like, hell yeah, want to have a drink?
Let's go.
We ended up just going back every year for the next 3 or 4 years. We went to the Conversion Excel conference, and we went to the DigitalMarketer conference in San Diego. There's a couple of years ago now, 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago. And we've become pretty close friends since then. But you're one of those people where you've got this unique ability to explain complex ideas in a very simple way. Yeah. And you're also pretty down to earth. And so I figured it'd be great to have you on this podcast, right? And we get to talk about all the marketing stuff. This is going to be like a geek out session, I would say, on, what are some of the things which you're seeing, like that's happening, like at the front lines. We will probably talk about some conversion strategies and kind of the theories behind them. Like I want to touch on kind of attribution and how you think about that.
I can't wait. I can't wait for that one. That one's going to be fun.
Because that one, I've been asking a few people about it, and I'm kind of stuck with it, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And then we're just going to talk about, kind of some of the tactics which you're seeing, because I know that you guys have the unique benefit of being able to experiment with a bunch of traffic that not many other organizations have, and I think, yeah, that's the intro. Like, I'm excited to have you here, and it's been a while since we've spoken anyway, so this has been like a good way to catch up too.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm really excited to geek out. I've been in such the last maybe 6 months or so, such in this more operations and software development mode, and kind of taking something from nothing to launch, and then marketing that out. It's fun to kind of go pure marketing again, to talk about some of those things, because that's truly my passion, what I've been doing the last 10 years, and then specifically on the conversion rate optimization, more data centric side of things. But being at DigitalMarketer for damn near 6 years now, I learned a lot in terms of kind of the acquisition side as well, where there's some neat stuff going on, specifically some of the stuff that we've done recently that's gonna be really cool to talk about. And then, yeah, when we get to attribution, we have some of those things. That one's gonna be fun. That's because good. I have an opinion there, as you know, I tend to, but
which is why I love you. And you have an opinion that's based on reality, which is great. It's not based on theory. And yeah. I think that was kind of one of the things which kind of, stood out to me at the very start, that first time, because I'd done so many courses and conferences and all that type of stuff, but you're the first person that said, hey, it's just like that. And I was like, oh, that's so good. And so that's what we're going to get to. But can I quickly ask, so you've moved from kind of the head of marketing role to head of operations and technology role.
Yes.
So what changed in terms of what you do every day? Because I would just really like to understand that, just so we can set kind of, I guess, a foundation, that everybody else can understand about you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I started going kind of all the way back with DigitalMarketer. I came in specifically to work on the data and optimization side on all of our campaigns. So I was doing all the split tests, kind of finding all the opportunity areas, kind of finding the best ways to get the most out of the traffic we were sending to the site, whether that was pay-per-click, organic, or anything like that. I moved down to Texas a couple years after joining DigitalMarketer to run the marketing team. So I had a small kind of lean team of marketers. We were just and then covering everything from, paid acquisition. We'd actually, at that time, we didn't take SEO or organic all that seriously. That was a big change that I added in when I recruited people for that team. And then email marketing. I think we're not shy to email if anybody's on the DigitalMarketer list. You know that. I actually remember being talking at your office, Alex, and when you're like, hey, some people don't want to email. I was like, if you're not going to email, you're not going to make money. So obviously you don't want to kind of hit people all the time, but there's definitely a delicate balance that you can hit there that's worth doing. And email is not dead, it's not dying, whatever. Anyway, so after
we'll get to that too, by the way, because I want to talk about email as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we had a lot of success and growth at DigitalMarketer during that time, when I was asked to actually run the company. So I ran the company as an interim general manager for nearly a year. And that's when I was doing I was kind of doing more of the marketing strategy on one side and working with our director of marketing there, kind of working through all that stuff, working on the product line. And then also a skill set that I have, which comes from kind of, I think, the rigorous analytics side and those things, and being kind of step by step and process driven, was that I migrated all of our back-end systems over a period of time while I was managing the company. To which, and I've also launched a software company with a friend a couple of years back that DigitalMarketer acquired. It was one of our portfolio companies. So they knew, I understand operations, I understand software. We wanted to start launching and releasing more pieces of software and getting it to market, get product market fit, and then start scaling some things out. So they, in the last 6 months, that's where I've moved and started focusing and doing a tour of duty there. As I'm kind of building that out. So I've done damn near everything in the marketing and now getting into the business world too, in terms of stuff I've done. So I do have a long view on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, great. And we're going to get into all that. But can I just confirm then? So before you were marketing the education programs, and then now you're transitioning to creating technology and kind of transitioning into SaaS marketing essentially, right? And having all those lovely conversations around CAC and LTV and all that type of jazz. Is that kind of the big transition?
Yeah, that's accurate. And I think that's the bigger transition. Good job distilling that one down, because I said a lot of stuff.
No, but that was really good for just kind of the history of you as well, you know, because like you've been done quite a lot.
Yeah, but it's funny too, like anyways, when you're talking about the conversations, it's always like LTV to CAC ratio and all those other things. I'm like, yeah, well, what problems are you solving? Let's talk about that first, then we can talk about what's going on there. That's a whole other thing to do.
And we're going to get to that too, because we have a section on kind of metrics to cover as well. So look, there's a lot of parts that we're going to be talking to, right? But can I just start with kind of something that's probably kind of relevant to your current role? What is the difference so far between kind of SaaS marketing and product marketing? You say, for example, education marketing. You know, so what are the biggest things that you're seeing as like the difference?
So when you're doing on more of the educational side of things and information, so education and information are so very distinct, because the marketing is actually kind of born out of, you have to build a product to then market, right? So you're creating like you'll see these challenge funnels popping up all over the place, which are highly successful. But
what's a challenge funnel?
A challenge funnel. So a challenge funnel is when you kind of set up a 5-day kind of almost event. And how we do them is with like Facebook groups or those things where you provide like, hey, do this each day, and people sign up at either no cost or low cost. And then you have a pitch at the end, right? And so you generally, like for the ones that, if you're gonna have a pitch at the end, that's a high ticket offer, you probably want to get people buying into the challenge at like a low dollar price point to show that they have some skin in the game. Then you provide the most insane amount of value over the next 5 days in terms of like a maybe 30 to 45 minute, like topical like piece of information that people can work through. And then by the time you get to the end of it, then you have kind of that profit maximizer upsell at the back end. And that's a pure info model. That's how you do it, right? And these things, you're seeing them everywhere at this point in time. And we've had several close to 7-figure challenges that we've put out over the last 3 months. They're really great. They get people involved. It turns people, rather than being like an active learner, into a passive learner into an active doer of an action. And when people start seeing movement, that's when they start believing, right? And so that's why those work so well. And so that, but if you think about information and education and training versus software, that is like, what that is the product, right? You'd use those types of mechanisms to drive to a software product, but you can't do it at the cadence at which you do it for an information type product or anything like that, where anything that we put out at DigitalMarketer or any of other brands that's information based is going to be it's going to be a splinter of another offer of another offer. So we'll have our core subscription offer and we kind of break things down. So there's always an information path to the to either the one-off purchase or the subscription. For SaaS, everything kind of, and those can all vary. For SaaS, it's all ending at that particular product, right? You're not seeing as much stuff on the product bundling side of things or anything like that. And the cadence for discussion with people is a little different. You pretty much like, you have a period of time when someone gets on your list for a SaaS product before you lose them. Similarly to or if they sign up for your product or anything like that, like they have a half-life, they're going to go. For the information side of things, you always have something new to talk about. So that's why it's the same, like that we've been saying for years, even back when we had like Content and Commerce Summit and those things, like e-commerce requires content for it to thrive, just like SaaS will require content there. But it's a very different product model in terms of how you start putting things together. I think it's more cut and dry on the back end for SaaS. And it's far more important for a SaaS marketer and anybody doing product marketing there to make sure that they're doing a lot of work within the product and creating, and they need to be more of a technical marketer. They need to have copywriting skills and those types of things, but they need to be a technical marketer, and they need to know people that start like building BD deals with for like tech integrations, media integration, media partnerships, and those types of things. On the information side, where you still need that type of thing, you can create a product out of nowhere with information, right? But you have like a quadruple churn rate, average churn rate, than what you'd see for SaaS. Like the average, like the kind of the industry standard acceptable churn rate for an information product. And I have this little, like I have a more academic like theory on this in general, and I'll say it and then people can scoff or like roll their eyes or comment or whatever. But I mean, you're looking at, if you have a 10% churn rate for an info subscription product, you're looking good. And and if you told that to a SaaS marketer, they expect to be in like 3%, right? Like, and 3% is like, you're okay, right?
Yeah.
That's how different those markets are, because you have to keep creating the new. And then in the US, like there's one type of loan you can't default on, and that's your student loans, right? Because when you sell someone education, it's consumed. You can never give it back. Mm-hmm. So when somebody learns something, it's always about, what have I learned lately from them, right? And it gets even more tricky, because if you think about how people learn in general, how people learn is they don't recall the first time they learned something or the first time they remembered something. Every time you recall something, you're recalling the last time you recalled it. That's why things get hazy and things like that. But when you think about information, there's going to be a time where it's like, oh yeah, DigitalMarketer taught me that. Oh yeah, digital. And then it's going to be like, I taught me that. Mm-hmm. And eventually it gets to that, because the recollection is a recollection of a recollection. Yeah. Wow. So that's why you see such high churn rates kind of in the info space there, because it's really about, what have you done for me lately? And that's why you have to create more products and product bundles and those types of things there.
And so what are you saying then that's working from a SaaS marketing perspective?
I've moved all over the place with SaaS marketing. We've tried a bunch of different freemium, like we've done the freemium model and those types of things, but if you don't have your onboarding in place, like within the application, you're hosed, like you're just dead in the water. And I personally hate freemium. I've watched a bunch of companies just lose big on that. Because the amount of effort it takes to get someone to put a credit card in once they're using something, they can just have like good enough syndrome. That sucks. I think credit card trials are kind of the way to go, like when you're putting those things together. I could also see just, pay up front, 30-day money back, especially if you're like in the B2B space, when you're doing a SaaS product, like generally, especially a low dollar SaaS product, if you're doing anything sub $500 or something a month, like you're generally going to be able to get them. And if they don't like it within 30 days, they could refund, or you can do a trial level there. But because that's generally like discretionary funds and those types of things. But I've been like, I like to add a bit of friction. I want to get people who are going to take the next step. It's not all about kind of just getting all those kind of freeloading users, and the second they get in and they don't understand something, or they don't see immediate value, like they're gone. Like even if they see value, they could just disappear, because they're like, oh, I have no reason to keep using this thing. Mm-hmm. And you can talk about things like, okay, well, maybe your onboarding needs to be better, or maybe your app needs to be more intuitive, or those types of things, or maybe you need people who are motivated. And how you get, and people show motivation through their wallet and their time. So
I think that's a fabulous point there. And I think that's a super important point, is like you can't conversion optimize a person that's never going to buy from you, right?
Exactly.
And so this is potentially this will be a good transition to conversion optimization talk, right? So this section is on CRS stuff, which is kind of the first time that we spoke. It was our first date. We had a conversation about conversions. It was great. But there's so many. Let's start with pet peeves of yours, just when it comes to conversion optimization around, like you spend so much time kind of optimizing a page that nobody actually visits, or you're split testing stuff, which you shouldn't be, So what are some of the mistakes that you see people make just when it comes to conversion optimization, or
I think
revenue optimization, or however you want to call it these days?
I'm glad you said it that, because my biggest pet peeve is anybody who talks about the damn acronym. Who cares? Move on. It's fine. Like CRO, people get it. Stop talking about like, is it this or is it this? We all know what this is. Really? Okay. We're trying to maximize engagement, whether that be a level of generating more leads, more sales, or even more kind of micro conversions at kind of the click-through level. If you don't have enough, sales coming through on the back end to do something that's statistically significant. I think my biggest pet peeve is just people just saying, like, just straight up, you should test that. Or it's like, no one knows, you should just test that. It's like, we have so much data on things, and testing is, and here's the crazy thing. I haven't run a true split test in probably like 2 years at this point, because I haven't seen the value I've needed to get from it over that time. Historically, like, you can start looking at things and say, hey, such and such person is acting in this way. And you can generally diagnose it with all the tools we have out there, like True Conversion, Hotjar, those types of things will help you see what's going on the page. You can look at your analytics and see if something's broken relatively easily. There's a lot of opportunity there. And then the real thing is if you're going to test something, you want to try to have you want to be able to theoretically use those learnings and apply them to everything else on your site, but it's all contextual, right? It's contextual for that point of time, for that particular page, for those sources of traffic. So what you need to be thinking about is, how do I develop, how do I make sure and ensure that my value proposition and everything kind of on the page is understood, and do they know what to do next? If you have those types of things down, you're looking pretty good. And I wouldn't even do like a standardized split test at that anymore. I'd probably look at, if I was going to set something up, it'd just be mostly like headline tests or those types of things these days, to see what hooks work and what things work there. I've avoided massive kind of redesign tests. Those ones are silly. I think if you have a theory of a template you want to try, it gets too dicey. And generally when people are doing tests like that, it's they're trying to do a do no harm. They're just trying to validate their own assumption that this new challenger should go there, but they're going to tell a data story anyways to put that challenger there anyways. So I think probably my biggest pet peeve, now that I'm talking about it, because actually I wrote a post about how I was done writing blog posts about split testing and done this stuff. It's on DM. I just kind of lost it. I was like, I'm done. All the information's out there. It's over. And
I love your rants, by the way, especially on LinkedIn as well. You did some good LinkedIn rants. It's great.
Yeah, I've pulled back from that. I'm trying to be a bit more positive, but this is old. This is deep rooted.
This is deep rooted. Yeah.
But I think the real problem is that they're used to validate. They're not used so you have an assumption and you're like, oh well, let's just test it. You're not trying to improve much. You're either you're trying to almost validate your ego or your thought that this thing was better than that. You also lose out in kind of the the gains, right? There's a cost to running these tests because you're splitting traffic. And then if you're going to try to do any sort of risk mitigation and run it at an 80-20 split or anything like that, it's going to be harder to run that thing. So you're effectively saying, half my traffic, I'm going to send you to something I don't know if it's going to do better than that, right? And I think it made more sense back in the day to run tests because less people were as data driven, but we have lots and lots of data at our disposal here. We have lots of ways to analyze things. So I think the opportunity cost now is just too high for what people are looking to do, especially if they're using these types of things on for a launch model or anything like that. If you're putting something out there that's only going to be going for 7 to 10 days, you're running a true or 7 to 14 days, you're running a true launch. don't get into just split test mode. Like run things, see what it works, tinker, and then move on. Like that's where sequential testing actually kind of makes sense. Or you could just do like a multivariate setup and just pay attention. And like I used to say, you know, you don't look at the test until it's done. Like let it cook. But in like a launch mode or in anything like that, don't let it cook. It's gonna burn. Like you need to be able to maximize those types of conversion. That's why multi-arm bandit algorithms and things like that work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can use something that, if you have a piece of software that can do that type of stuff, good on you. But I think where we're tripping, my head of sales is going to laugh at me so much for using his quote that he says all the time, but I roll my eyes at. We're tripping over pennies to pick up dollars. Or no, I screwed up because that's not mine. It's not my quote.
Sure.
The idea is we're like, just like, hey, look at all these pennies, we're missing all the dollars. And that's what's happening a lot, I think, in the optimization world, where they get into this, well, what if like the button color still comes up? Well, what if the button text was different? It won't matter. Like, is it clear what you're offering? Is it valuable? And do they know what actions to take next? And then if you're really good at it, can they anticipate what they're going to see next? Right? So if they're going to click through on something, are they seeing a checkout page? Are they seeing just an add to cart? Are they, what's going on at that point? So you need to kind of cover those types of things. If you do that, all the testing in the world is only going to be a kind of incremental gain, if that. It might even just be a phantom win at that point. So there's a lot of better things to be looking at, and especially at this point in time.
So then, which is such a fantastic point. And I think, you know, like the big thing that I came away after the first conference back in 2014 was I came up with Duncan. It's like, cool, we're no longer doing A/B testing anymore. We don't have enough traffic, and the speed to the result is too long. And so we just, and so the value of it's completely gone. Can you talk to that part of it, please? Yeah, because this was the big thing that I walked away with. Is like, like, could you just explain the environment that kind of is required to do a true A/B test?
Yeah. And it's funny because, you went to a split test conference and you're like, we're not running tests anymore, which I think is amazing. But yeah, I mean, it's all about test, because you'll hear a lot of people talk about test velocity. And if you're ever at a conference and you have even low to moderate traffic website and they're talking about test velocity, leave. There's no reason for you to be at this conference because the topics that they're going to be talking about have nothing to do with you. They're only for like kind of the top 1%ish that are going to be in the room. But what we noticed here, I actually have a chart. I could probably send you the screenshot of that thing because it was just like how many conversions you need per variant and how long it would take to get to those types of wins. But I mean, you don't ever look at just pure traffic, right? Because you could have a high traffic website that has a low conversion rate, like maybe like a content marketer that has a pure content site. They probably have less sales coming in as much as they have like readers or even leads, even subscribers, to which I'd argue what they would optimize there like for subscribers at that point, because then they're going to be able to use email marketing and kind of pull that stuff further. But it requires, I mean, hundreds, so I think how I showed it to you is, I mean, you need hundreds of conversions per variant in order to pull this thing off. And when you're running
part one.
That's part one.
That's part one of the things which you require. Cool. So it's hundreds of conversions per variant.
Yeah. Not hundreds of visitors, hundreds of conversions per variant. And then it's almost like exponential as you're adding more variants to it. So if you're a low to moderate website running a split test, you don't want to have multiple variants. You're going to be doing A to B. And so then if you're like, oh, hey, let's test this headline variant, it's likely not going to be big enough or it's not going to be a large enough swing to have a large enough impact, right? So what you need to start looking at is how much of an impact can you expect to have between the two variants? Because that's also going to dictate the number of conversions for it to be statistically significant. So you need far more conversions per variant to have a 5% lift for something that's a 5% lift than for something that's like a 30%, right? And then you have to ask yourself as you're selecting things, can I expect to get 30% growth, like a 30% jump off of the stuff I'm about to do? And if you ask that question and you say no, don't do it, like at all. So you need to be looking at like, what's the potential impact you're expecting to have, knowing that bare minimum, you need to have hundreds of conversions per variant, right? So you have that, and then you get into time.
And this was what messed with me the most.
I mean, time is, it's tricky with this, because generally when you're running a split test that you want to be able to have scalable results for, you want to be able to run them for entire business cycles. So the less conversions you have, or the less impact effect that you're going to have, the longer the period of time you need to round up for a week, or at least, to close out, at least if you have like a light business cycle. But I like to round up any type of week, because you can get a kind of, day by day variance and those types of things. I mean, you're looking at going from like, you can go from something as much as that was going to be like say you had like, if you had a test that was getting moderate traffic, moderate conversions, and you just said A, B variant, you could probably pull off, and you expect it to have a big impact. You could do it about 7 to 14 days. But if you don't expect to have that big of a lift, that thing can jump all the way up to being up to a month and a half. And if you're spending, then you have all these other things with like if you're going past 4 weeks, then you have like cookies resetting. I mean, the testing industry is gonna be really interesting with all in a post-cookie world. I'm really curious about that. But you're getting you're adding all sorts of other exteriorities and variables if you're going longer than a month. So then it's not going to be a worthwhile test, because the data is going to be tainted. And then here's the real kicker. That's just for the test. How long is it going to take for you to roll out your learnings and then also validate those learnings? So not only are you going to be taking, like, you're going to have these variants that you like, you're going to be like, great, it took us 4 weeks, we did it. How do we roll these out across the board? Do you know what you're not going to do it. The fact, you're just not. It's going to stay on whatever thing you just did there, and you're not going to roll those things out if you're doing it for like multiple landing pages. Or maybe if you're, I guess it's not a complete fact. I guess if it's a checkout page or something, you might, but you're still going to have all this legacy stuff in there, and it's just going to have diminishing returns, and then it's just going to regress to the mean again. So it takes way too much time to split hairs when you're doing, if you have a low traffic, even moderate traffic site, and especially if you're looking at the wrong pages too. So
yeah, right. Cool. So we basically have hundreds of conversions per variant. We've got the predicted uplift, and then you've got time, right? And time has a limit. And what's the upper limit of time in terms of any test that somebody should be looking at?
I get twitchy at anything over 3 weeks, like personally now. I used to, in trainings, I used to say go up to at least 6, but that's like I even put it in red, like danger zone, like super danger zone, like, and I think I've become more, I've pulled back more from that, because I don't believe a lack of data is a problem. Wrong data is a problem. Inaccurate data is a problem. And it creates false beliefs, which then can hurt your business. I got fired from a gig one time because I got into it with their CTO about, I was doing a webinar, and I was talking about, split test results. And someone asked me, can you do split tests on a small site? I said, just don't do it. Here's the thing, like, and I have this whole belief of like, best practices are best practice because they're common, and what's common to a user is always best. So that's how I look at things.
I saw that talk at the Conversion Excel conference
yes,
a few years ago. Yeah. That was a good one, actually. That
was a fun one. That was that one was so out, like that audience didn't want to hear that talk. I remember doing that one. That one was interesting. But yeah, I get a phone call, and they're like, hey, we're releasing a split test feature to this application, and you just completely told like a good amount of our audience not to use it. And I just went, hey man, it's just math. To which I was fired. But it's true. And I think inaccurate data is the worst thing that you can have, especially in kind of this data-driven marketing landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. What's could you talk quickly about the null result? What's the null result? Because this is something else that I was like, oh yeah, that explains so many things to me about why my split tests weren't working. Really?
They're like nearly like the 70% of tests that happen come out in null. Like there's people look at tests that they think 2 things can happen. when you're running tests. They think you're either gonna get this uplift and it's gonna be great and we're all gonna be just popping bottles, whoop, whoop, or you're gonna get this like down, like this just super loss. And then you're like, but hey, I learned something. Here's the kicker. Most of the time, and this is why it's a like kind of a risk, like it becomes a risky game. It's not, even though they're A/B tests, it's not like you have either it did something or it did something. And most of the time it does nothing. And the reason that most of the time it does nothing is because people aren't kind of testing the right things. They're not looking at the things that matter. That's kind of the big thing. Because I used to say as a joke, like, oh, look, you're done testing and nothing's going to change anymore. It's like, that was always kind of tongue in cheek, but it is good to know like when you need to stop working on a page and move on. And that really comes down to the amount of effort going into it versus the potential result that's going to be coming from it. Like similar to, it all comes back to what's your perceived impact. And if someone's going to be listening right now and say, well, Justin, I have no idea what it would be. Take a guess. Do you want to know how we come up with ideas like at DigitalMarketer? And we're looking at like, not ideas, like when we're looking at benchmarks or anything like that for ourselves, if we don't have data, we go, we think it's about this. And then we just do it and see if it happened. There is like, sometimes it's worth showing a dart. And I hated it whenever Ryan and Richard and I would be in a meeting. They'd be like, Justin, I need you to tell us what like potential uplift on this one thing would be. And I'd start flop sweating, being like, I need to be the most accurate. And then they pretty much beat that out of me when they're like, no, just pick something. And it was really hard for me to do, but it was a muscle that I needed to start flexing. And so that's really important when you're thinking about kind of the tests you're running and kind of the stuff that you're focusing on and really what's worth doing. And because that's really all this is. It's like,
and it's
how do you prioritize what's
well,
worth
right? It's opportunity cost. It's time of that versus not of something else, right?
Yeah, could you imagine running something for 4 weeks and it's a null? I've done it. It sucks. And you don't learn a lot. All you learn is, oh, shouldn't do that again. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Like null results are the vast majority of tests that happen.
Can you also talk about, because there's something else that happens as well, right? Is that, and speak to me about confidence rate. Like, because there's always a confidence rate. It's like this specific variations one at this level confidence. What does that exactly mean? Because it's got a loophole in there, which if you're not careful and you don't understand it, you're then confused. Why is this not actually increasing my revenue? You know?
Yeah. So confidence rate, like I've heard a lot of things in that. So I'm not a trained statistician. Just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah.
But I know my applied statistics well enough. Just want to make sure people know that. But when you're looking at the confidence rate, it's not saying you have like a 95% chance of getting that result. That's not what it's saying. It's at all. It's saying that the result isn't due to statistical noise, that it's not a false positive, right? So the higher your confidence rate, if you're like at 95%, that would mean that there's still a 5% chance that the lift you're seeing is erroneous, that it happens to be like due to other things. So that means, I think it's like, what is it? At a 90%, that means there's a 1 in 10 chance, like that you're just kind of off there. So it gets a little tricky there. It's not a matter of like, oh yeah, we expect to see this rate at like we 95% sure that this is the exact lift we're going to get. That's not what it is. It's saying, hey, this change is only like 5% a false positive. And that's
so there's a chance, and so there's a chance that it doesn't have any impact on the revenue numbers at the end of that. So it could kind of increase conversion rate, possibly.
And then you
maybe
also have to
not as well, right? But but
and
maybe not.
And it's only talking about that snapshot of time too. So that's another important factor. Like, are there any other things happening that could have influenced any sort of changes or those things? Are you seeing different traffic source influxes? Are you a seasonal business that's out of season or in season, and those types of things? But yeah, the confidence rate, and then you have confidence rate and you have confidence interval. Interval is getting more into like, you can expect to see like this percentage when they're like, if you're like, hey, you have a 15% lift, but then they're like, but it's because we don't have enough conversion data. It could go from nothing to like a loss to like a big win. Like, and you'll start seeing those in testing statistics now. And I mean, it's way more refined than it was when we met. They've refined those things. They do a pretty good job visually to kind of show that. But there's still there's always a risk, again, that null. And then also, like, even if it's like, hey, yeah, bingo, there's other, again, variables, and there's also the chance that it's still due to that type of noise. And if you're running, like, if you're not one of the, if you're not even DigitalMarketer, we have a hard time doing some of these tests, and we have tons of traffic. Like, I'm talking, if you're not Microsoft, if you're not those types of companies, that's when they can start doing these types of things, because and kind of at a small, like, it's a large scale, but do small scale changes and small scale implementations, because they just have so many numbers, or just so many visitors, so many conversions that are happening. Whereas you could have something that says, yes, this is a 95% chance, but it could also not have that many. You could have just a big lift between the two variants. So one thing to know is, whenever you start a split test in general, I like, you should probably ignore like the first 2 days anyways of data, because there's going to be this natural variance due to like just tech implementation, as well as novelty and novelty effect, and I forget the other one off the top of my head, but there's a bunch of stuff happening there. So you'll see in nearly all split tests, they go like this, and then like that. That's just kind of due to a bunch of different things there. So I generally ignore the beginning part, and then I average out from when we start seeing actual repeatable differences. But say, for instance, you have a test where you have 15 conversions in the control variant and 10 in the challenger. That's a 50% lift, right? Or 50% difference. That's a big difference. And the numbers aren't going to be looking at them. They'll say now, like, oh, the sample size is too small or whatever, but it's going to say a high confidence rate on that one because of just the delta between them. So that's where even having a certain rule of thumb of like just hundreds per variant, those types of things in there are a good spot check to be like, am I jumping to conclusions? Because the worst thing you could ever do is take a look and go, oh yeah, we're 50% up, and it's only five sales, and then tell your boss, oh yeah, if we put this out for the rest of the year, 50% increase in sales across the board, let's get crazy. That's just not going to happen.
That's it. Yeah, that's the conversation of a junior optimizer, we'll call it, right? The people who just start, they're so about the numbers, right? But let's quickly then jump to, okay, so we know that most of the time now you shouldn't be doing A/B tests because A, you probably don't have enough conversions, B, you're probably not going to get the results fast enough, right? But you want to increase the performance of your site, of your funnel, of all these things, right? How do you approach it instead?
So a lot of how I approach it, it's a lot of it comes from historical knowledge. I do a lot of research in terms of like what other people are doing. And I know there's a lot of people now, like I know Pep is all about like sea of sameness and those things. He's trying to get away from that. I still truly believe that if you don't have to retrain somebody to interact, you have a much better chance of you're no longer having to teach them how to use your site or how to navigate it. And they can stay hyper-focused on your message, right? And then really how it comes down to when we're looking at different funnels there, we do use testing, or not even really testing. We set certain baselines between each step of the funnel where we're like, hey, we'd expect X number of people to sign up for this lead magnet, or we'd expect so many people on day one of this promotion to add to cart and this many people to this. So we have that benchmark data. And if anything's below it, then that's when we start doing kind of qualitative analysis to see like what are they doing on there. See, are they are they scrolling through the page? Are they hanging up anywhere? Is our value proposition wrong? It's more or less, are we meeting the expectations we set because we have some historic, we have a ton of historic data, and then if we're not, we become detectives to find out what needs to be shifted quickly. And that's where some short scale tests can come in, because if we can see a quick jump or anything like that between them, cool. But that data is going to be useless to scale out anywhere. It's more or less a reaction. But more or less, it's like we draw a line in the sand of this is what we expect. If it's not happening, we have to figure, because eventually at some point you go, our offer is just wrong, and then we pull the promo. Then we have to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. And it happens a good amount. The best, like, I mean, I've always said that we have a better batting average than most, but we've whiffed hard on some things. And it's about knowing the indicators of when you have something that you need to put all your money behind or where you need to pull back. That's really how we look at things now, versus like, we gotta have several variants of this for the landing page, and then the upsell needs to have this, and then blah, blah, blah. It's like, nah, how about, like, we say we get 40% opt-ins on all of our lead magnets. If something's if something is like at like 30, all right, let's figure out how are people interacting differently? And most of the time, here's the kicker, it has nothing to do with the page. It's mostly the audience going to it. It's normally an audience mismatch or something like that. Or it has to do with like how we set up the email or how we set up the ad. It's the page most of the time is probably fine. People know how to use the internet.
So cool. So on that point there then, because what you're really talking about is understanding the value which you are kind of offering the audience, right? And I think a lot of times when people are looking at kind of how to improve the performance of a website, they just look at the website and they don't actually think of the audience. But actually, if you understand the audience, you know the one thing to say to them that is the best hook to get them across the line. And then everything else on the page is just kind of supporting that hook. Just prove that hook is not a bunch of lies, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Is that kind of the best way to kind of explain kind of how do you step into something which you may not know, right? Because say, for example, now, right, you have all the history and all the data, but you might have to step into a campaign that doesn't have all the history, right? But how would you go about that? Like, is it about the audience first? Like, is that where it's at?
It's absolutely about the audience first. It's who are we talking to? So we'd run, like, we run for any new product or anything that we're trying to promote. We put together, we do our like customer avatar worksheet as well as our before and after grid. And that'll pretty much do everything for you. So if we know who we're talking to and we know like what they're going to have, how they're going to feel, how it's going to improve their average day, and how it's going to change their status, if you can talk to all of those things and they become more important the further down you go, because have is just table stakes. Then you know what they're getting, right? How they're going to feel. Okay, you're getting a little bit better there. But the only way for you to know how to talk about those things is to know who you're talking to. And in a lot of cases, know who you're talking to based on where they're coming from as well. So it's going to be like, hey, if they're coming to like like one of the things, like an easy shift on a page for us would be if we're running like a flash sale, like we're just going to talk about, like, we're going to be hammering home is they're going to feel upset that they didn't get this because it's more expensive now. That's what we're going to hammer. Like, and then there's times where that doesn't work as well, and we have to rethink like how we want to make people feel on those things. And then, I mean, when we launched our certification model of things, like we were telling them like, hey, like you're going to have this status, you're getting a badge. Like, I think like, what is it? There's like a Napoleon quote that's like people will follow or do something. People will do all sorts of things. This is the terrible paraphrase of it, but people will kind of do whatever for just like a ribbon or a badge of honor of some kind. They're always going to do it. So, and that's why status is so important there. So I think it would be like, okay, if I was coming into a new campaign, I'm like, who are we talking to? And if they don't know that, I'm like, all right, we need to find out, because like when people are like, well, I don't want to, like, I want to talk. Like,
how do you find out, by the way?
You start looking at like, so one, if you're starting brand new, like you should have an idea.
If you haven't done this before, for example, right? Like it's your first time, you kind of think you understand your customer. You kind of think you may not have created all the segments, or you may, right?
Yeah.
Let's say there's basically like a few segments that, you know, cool. So I'm going to target, say, for example, it's business owners that make between basically X and X. And then I'm going to target, you know, kind of this specific segment and then that segment and stuff like that. Yeah. So how do you then expand out the customer avatar?
Yeah. So there's great ways to do that. One of the ways that we do, let me pull up this one thing real quick. Let's see if I can pull it up. I probably could pull it from memory, but let's do it this way.
Yeah, that's
I'll
good.
pull it up on my screen. So generally, like, you have your standard stuff. Like, we're simply like, you know, like, are they business owners or these things? Like, you start looking at goals and values, like sources of information, challenges and pain points, and then kind of the objections. Like, those are the big things that you want to be thinking about. So like, for like, I'll share like one of our customer avatars that we have for DigitalMarketer, where for like, and this is, we have a product that's just for agency owners, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, goals and values, they want to scale their business, get larger retainers, train their team. And so all these things can start being used in terms of the messaging when you're talking to them. And that's where you can start trying to tweak how you talk and how you fit your offer together. So delegate more to team, let go of the day-to-day, work more on the business. So work more on the business, less in the business. Values, like family comes first, work-life balance for company, grow and empower employees, surround yourself with those you admire. Sources of information. And when you do sources of information, this is going to help you when you're picking your actual, when you're trying to find these people, doing kind of cold outreach. Where are they hanging out? What are they interested in? So like, I feel like agency owners would have books like Lean In, Story Brand. They'd be following Seth Godin. Then magazines, HBR, Forbes, HER, blogs and websites. Like, they're on Facebook, they're on LinkedIn, conferences they go to, inbound on like Entree Leadership, gurus, and then kind of some other stuff that you'd have there. So that's going to tell you, and then like where they are and what they're interested in. And then you can start doing, like, you can start putting social campaigns together with that. Where you can start getting into the social chatter, where you can start kind of doing things there. It can also, like, you can look at like how people write in those and kind of talk to them in the way that they're used to be talked to. Then you have your goals, but then you get into challenges and pain points. Like, what are the challenges? And then this is where you kind of dig into the before and after side of things. They have these challenges and pain points. How are you going to deal with them? Right.
And how do you figure out the challenges and pain points? Because everything else so far, you could find online, you could do some searches, but kind of understanding kind of the inner workings of someone to give them the right answers to the things that they're thinking that maybe they don't even know they're thinking. Yeah. Or maybe they do. But how do you find that out?
Facebook groups, like join stuff where people are talking about these things. Like communities, finding the communities where people are chatting is the best way to do some type of research there. If you have any customers, interview them. So you can either be kind of a lurker, passive person, but you always have to be active on things. So interviewing people, looking through if you're an established business, like looking through your customer care inquiries, talking to your sales team, seeing what what sales pitches work, what don't, because they're going to test other things out, because no matter what script you give them, they're going to go off script at some point. Mm-hmm. They're going to find a way to tweak things that work for them.
Yeah.
So always interviewing them. But I mean, especially with how open different communities are now, specifically on Facebook, like just join a couple of communities that like your key audience would be in, and just start listening and search for like different challenges, be like having a hard time or those types of things, where people are asking questions. That is a gold mine, and it's going to be a great way for you to start filling that out and finding holes in the market for your company, and also in how you'd articulate things as well.
That's awesome, because I think this is the biggest one I think I've learned over the last few years, right? Is really just understanding the audience. Like, you know, like kind of at the very beginning, I was all about the button color. This is like 10, 15 years ago, right? button color, like, or button shape even. Jesus, that was some time ago, right? And then it was like, all right, forget button color. Now it's all about kind of the bigger changes on the website, right? All right, cool. Let's make this bigger updates, but not really understanding kind of who the updates are for, just focusing about us and not about the person actually on the site. And then we moved to understanding the actual audience segments, you know, per segment understanding. It changes the game. Yeah. It changes the game, because now you know what they actually want, and that's what you can actually provide them. And no conversion optimization in the world is going to get you there without understanding the audience. It's not going to do it, is it?
No. Yeah, it's like I optimized it from 0 to 1, infinite lift. Like, we did it.
We did it. And so, yeah, like if there was one piece of advice that I can put out to people on the podcast, is just spend more time in the audience understanding. I call it kind of like, I forget who said it, but it's like eating your vegetables, right? It's like kind of understanding the audience is like having your greens, right? It's, you don't want to do it, but it's really, really good for you, right? It's really, really good for you. And the dessert is the split test setup or the software, which you do at the very end. That's the dessert, right? That part is super awesome. And I love the point which you just said on the Facebook groups and the community. That's the first time I've heard that one, actually. And I think it's just so smart because they're sharing. They're sharing exactly what they're thinking. And it may not be perfect, but it's a lot more insight than what you're going to have kind of outside of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're sharing in a way. And so I break down qualitative data in two camps. You have you have passive qualitative data and active qualitative data. Active being that they know they're in a state, they know that their information is being recorded essentially. So people who take surveys, people and whatnot, but people who are more of a passive state, they not state, but they're it's passive user data because they're hardly passive in some of these things. Would be things like customer care, would be things like Facebook groups, would be those where they're customers in the wild. They're people in the wild. They're acting as they would as if there's pretty much no repercussions, right? And that is the most unfiltered, unfettered piece of data that you can really use to give you an edge.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think we've had a good chat on conversions, right? And we could keep going for days, and we have gone for days before. But let's just jump now to the next really challenging topic in the world today, which is attribution. Yeah. Right? Attribution, like trying to figure out what basically every tactic as part of a strategy plays in converting somebody to spending money with you.
I'm getting a drink for this one.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. All right. And I hope that the intro was there before, but normally we'd both have a drink right now, but it's like pretty early in the morning here in Australia. So, and it's a Wednesday.
Yeah, it's evening in Texas right now. I'm not a degenerate.
It's evening in Texas right now. But just as a quick intro, attribution, just understanding, how each channel plays a part kind of in the acquisition of a customer is something that people have been talking about now for years. And there's been some kind of platforms that have been introduced, but it's not there yet, right? And so what are you seeing over there, Justin, in terms of attribution? What are you guys actually just doing to tell, should we keep spending, this much money on this channel versus that much money on that channel?
Don't do it.
Don't do it?
Don't do. Who cares? It's all in. Here's why you shouldn't care really all that much about attribution right now, because a lot of the people that are doing it are also going to be looking at it more from a paid channel perspective, and being like, hey, do I put more in Google? Hey, do I put more on Facebook? Here's the thing. Google and Facebook are both, they have PhD peeps that are just focused all the time at making sure that their pixel gets last click attribution. That's what they're shooting for. So they're at odds with one another. And anytime you're doing any sort of data analysis or any sort of work there, the truth is kind of in the middle as it stands. So like, yes, look at what Google's saying. Look at what Facebook's saying. Look at those. And then they shouldn't be all that wildly different, to be quite honest. Like if they're super wildly different, then one, you set something up wrong, or two, they're being disingenuous. So I like how I look at it is I'm pretty old school on stuff. Like I look at Google Analytics, I look at my source medium report, and I go, oh yeah, that looks about right. Like email's our big driver. Like email and paid media are our biggest drivers. Organic's grown since we really invested in organic over the last couple of years. But you can't expect, like, do you really want to be like, all right, so the general path is someone comes to one post paid, 3 posts organic, then they get an email and buy. Boom. So all we have to do is optimize to get those to all those things. Or like it just doesn't work like that. It just doesn't. And it's so interesting to me that people are so hyper focused on this, because at the end of the day, are you making more money than you're spending when you're doing these things, especially if you're looking at paid channels? Because I'll tell you, This one hurts. Okay, so
Mhm.
I'm going to tell you this one. I don't think I've told this story outside of Digital Marketers. So I might get who knows if I get in trouble. Who cares? So we were marketing one of our conferences,
Mhm.
and we had we were working with a outsourcer, not outsourcer. We were
Mhm.
working with an agency for our Google ads.
Mhm.
I was chatting and I was saying, hey, like, how are things going? Blah, 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 blah. He's like, Google's saying we're killing it right now. I was like, it's not saying that in the bank. Like, I am not seeing any of these sales that you're telling me that you see. And I went away for TNC because this was for a campaign to sell the recording. So I was like incommunicado,
Mhm.
to which $100,000 in ad spend was spent over those 3 days that I was incommunicado, because they were using the Google algorithm to optimize through these things that never actually existed, which means it's just getting more people who are less likely to convert. And it was a mess. It was like a complete $100,000 mess because people just relied on like what one thing was saying. There is no single truth except for what's in the bank. Okay, so there's no single truth in data.
Mhm.
Are you seeing these things come through? And always think, trust but verify. Always, always, always. That's why this whole attribution debate just seems nonsensical to me. And it just sounds like a lot of people who are really bored right now, who are trying to justify their positions in some things. Like, that's what it sounds like to me. And it's so crazy that it's one of those,
Mm.
I just don't care. I just don't, like, at all.
So, okay. Same, by the way, because I do think of it similarly, but trying to put like a budget to a tactic. For example, right?
Yeah.
We know there's a funnel for
Yeah.
a lot of businesses, right? And we know that there's basically the stage of awareness where you probably want to use some content and ideally
Yeah.
track, say, for example, like acquire like an email address, or maybe it's just a view on Facebook, and then you're going to retarget them with the consideration ad to get them to become an email, right?
Yeah.
How do you then approach setting that budget? Because
So
you can't just focus on conversion because they haven't.
no, God, no.
The
Because
funnel's too small.
you need to be able to build out your pixeled audience. You need to be able to build out more things. Like there's a lot of factors, and this is something I used to get into a lot of arguments about, like, internally, where they'd be looking at, and so we'd be running, and like we run pretty large scale paid media budgets, and I'd be asked to justify the I was asked to measure the effectiveness of our top funnel, like, awareness campaigns based off of a bottom funnel conversion. And that took about a solid 8 months of arguing on my point to be like, you're asking a fish to climb a tree. Like, we can know what that looks like and see this through, and that's not even going to be that accurate. Or you could look at, what are we willing to spend on an email address? What are we willing to spend on a demo request? What are we willing to spend on a trial? What are we willing to spend on a click to the site? And if you start looking at it like that, and don't just think of that in terms of CPC, think of that in terms of everything. So say we're doing this partnership with ActiveCampaign. It's actually going tomorrow. This just works. That had such an insane value to us. There was no payment between the companies or anything like that. Like, we worked together, partnered on this project together, and did, standard, like, hey, we're running this thing, like lead generation for the two companies, right?
Right, of course, yes.
I know how much our leads cost us, and I know how many unique leads we got from that. And that, to me, was worth, let me just do a quick math. I'm probably not allowed to say this anyway. So if you want to, you like beat me out.
Adrian, you got to beep this part out if it's if he wants it to be beeped out. And Adrian's the video guy, by the way. That's not like a rocket.
Adrian,
yeah.
right there.
Got it.
So I look at the actions that need to happen, and if we're not seeing the volume for what it's worth, then it's not worth doing. So, like, if we're not seeing, like, if I know I'm happy at, like, if I look at all of our clicks and value, and I was like, hey, let's say 50 cents. Let's just say that. Like, I'm picking a number because I don't go down to the click level. I look at email subscribers, free accounts, demos, and trials, and what I'm willing to spend there. And all those are just based on kind of back end numbers. I know with the trial, like, if I can get a trial at $200, we make that money back in 45 days, and then we're profitable after 45 days on that, and I'm willing to float that. I know that leads, I want to keep them $5 or less.
Yeah, got it. Okay, and so everything that you do across every stage of the funnel is tracking those numbers? No.
How
How about for the top? Yeah, how about for the top? Let's start with the top, because like it becomes much easier just when you start tracking emails and all that, and like as soon as you start to come down to the bottom of the funnel, like you're actually like getting them to take action. But what do you do for the top part before there's action that you care about?
This one's fun, and this is again a correlation, and we all know correlation isn't causation, and it's actually it's a lagging correlation, which actually makes me think it is causal. Mm-hmm. Whenever we go, why are we spending this much money on content? Whenever we do that and then we pull back, our lead costs in 3 weeks will spike. Every time. And so it really comes down to looking at like we know we need to pay to play in those levels, where that's just table stakes, because you need to have that lead flow. You need to have just those eyeballs coming in to build retargeting audiences, to catch that, because that's what you can start measuring retargeting audiences the second someone comes to your site. Like you got them. You have that bit of information. You can start getting them again. So you need to have those things in place. Also, some like on-site retargeting stuff, like strategic pops for those types of things that you don't be a dick about it. But like strategic pop-ups for those types for new visitors that are coming there if they're like leaving. But really, it comes down like I know the causal relationship there, and I know it would happen. I think anybody will say that every time. That's the first area to get cut. Every time like my budget would get cut, like hey, they'd be like, hey, let's cut content. I go no. And then I'd lose each time until I was able to show them after like 3 iterations of that. It's like, look how much lead costs went up. Look and one of our wildly important goals was hitting like 30,000 leads or something like a month. And I'm like, do you know how much this is going to cost us now? Like, it's going to cost us a lot of money. But it's also a good way to start thinking about, like, when you think about the value journey, if you know what you're willing to pay for like an email, what you're willing to pay for even a website visit at that level, even if you can get to granular to the level of what you're willing to pay per click, that becomes extremely powerful when you're trying to like set up partnerships with other companies. Mm-hmm. And it also gets more powerful for if you're going to build out like an affiliate program, because then you can have all these stats and then more people want to work with you. Like, know those numbers. If you know those numbers, you win. You don't have to worry about attribution anymore. You just know what these things are.
So from a content perspective then, because just this part here, because I just want to just confirm this a little bit more. Would you be tracking the next step in the funnel? So for example, if you're running advertising on content, would you then confirm the performance of that by how the retargeting audience is performing? Is that what you're doing? Or like, yeah.
So that's not completely. So that's an indicating metric for me. I think it can be a little volatile, but it's a good checker to be like, hey, of these people that are coming in, are we maintaining our CPL, our cost per lead? Are we maintaining that with this stuff? Because if the CPL is going up while we're spending more on content, it means we're bringing people into our content that don't give a shit about us, right? So that's a good like kind of checks and balances. For me, it's more about, especially when it comes to content. No, I actually kind of nailed it. It's mostly about how I can get retargeting audience, how I can build new retargeting audiences if I can do it cheaply. To be quite like, and some of it comes down to like, hey, like we'll spend a lot of money on video production. We have a really big video team, and we spend a lot on that. And we do different types of retargeting strategies based off of people who view X% of our videos and those types of things. So content for us, one, is meant to be valuable in and of itself, but it's measured upon the percent new visitors coming to the site, as well as a cost, kind of a checks and balance of like, are we maintaining or improving our CPL?
Yeah, no, got it. And then, is there a budget which you like, or a percentage of the budget which you would just like at the beginning of a campaign, or just kind of like in like general, essentially, where you say,
about 15%.
15% on just content, kind of advertising, or content promotion. And this this whole conversation kind of is a conversation that we've been having internally for years, right? Well, we know when we publish a specific kind of content and we promote it heavily, all our leads will increase from all channels.
Yep.
And we're like, but the people, and we track all this stuff, but the people who subscribe aren't the people who saw it. Like, it's so hard to correlate the data to say this piece of content has led to this lead, because it has this effect that, you know, somebody might share it and then they might see it. And then, I don't know, it's like, it's really hard to really get specific on it. And so there is, I guess, an element of just, you see it happening. Yeah. You spend more on this happens. Right. And then you need to kind of make some like data, I think, like around it, which is what kind of to this conversation, like is talking about, you know, having the data. Yeah. Cool. So when we spend this money, this is what happens. And when we stop spending this money, that's what happens. Right. And that's the best thing that we've got so far, right? Because there's nothing really apart from that, is there? It's last click mostly. And if you're going to be running any ads, like if it's on Facebook or Google or whatever,
they're working
against
each other, and they're working against each other to make sure that they can get that click. So they're incentivized from Facebook and Google side. This is me aluminum foil hat. They Google wants to be like, hey, look, it's Google ads that have done this. Facebook wants to be like, no, it's Facebook ads that did this. So they're going to be at odds with each other. And they're like the Joker and Batman. I don't know which one's which, but they'll be doing this forever. It's like an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Like, it's going to be happening like that for quite a long time. So don't fret over that. Know your baseline metrics and what you're willing to pay. And then that'll tell you when to start pulling back or putting the gas on.
Okay, cool. All right. Now let's just jump to tactics now, right? Because you got a lot of tactics, right? Where or which platforms are you most excited about currently that is getting you performance currently?
Are you talking about ad platforms or just what?
Yeah, well, yeah. So it could be ad platforms, or it could be kind of channels or tactics. You know, so what is the thing at the moment, like in the digital space, which is working best for you?
That challenge funnel game, man, that's the one. It's getting a little saturated right now, but it's not too saturated, especially in spaces outside of like the information space. But the concept of doing a challenge launch over a 5-day period with a, and you could have a low dollar upsell on the back end too, of just being like, hey, do this thing. But it goes back to everything we've taught forever and done forever at DigitalMarketer, which is value first. So it's free to low dollar entry. They come in. So the funnel kind of goes like this: like, you sign up, it's either free or low dollar, whatever it's going to be. If it's a low dollar one, you set it to be a 2-step sign up process with your privacy policy on the first one there. So if you collect their email address and you can hit them back up, you can be like, hey, you didn't finish, you showed interest, and do that type of thing, especially if they're paying. Comes in, then you have you can offer like a VIP portion to it. So you go, hey, we have this challenge. Oh, well, of all these things, we did this thing called the napkin challenge. If you go to like digitalmarketer.com/ it's closed now, so this isn't even a plug, it'll just be there. /LP/napkin, you can see what the page looks like to see like how it was put together.
Yes.
But it's really like, hey, by the end of these 5 days, you're going to have this. So it's by the end of finite period of time, 5 days, like 3 to 5 days, which we keep it, you will have X. That's the statement. And then you have, for each day, you have a themed day about what you're going to be talking about. And we did this all through, for one of our challenges, our probably best performing one, we didn't even use Zoom for. We just did it in like a Facebook video thing, but we do them in like Zoom calls and those things. And then what you do is you have like a Facebook community that you then archive after it's all said and done too. So it's like there is a open and close for this in general. And then you have a different and how it worked for DM was, we had Facebook feed only. If you did VIP, which was a $95 upsell on it, then you had access to the Zoom room where you could where your specific questions would be answered, and you had an extra 45 minutes with the instructor at the end of each call.
Yeah.
And then the last call is then the pitch. Then you have like a follow-up sequence at the end of that to crush that out. For DM, that did probably about 300,000 in revenue. And then for one of our other brands, the first one did just under $1 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
At the end of the 7 days or 14 days, whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but outside information products, then could a smaller business that has like a service, could they use it, or could like a bank use it, or could, you know, so are there specific kind of businesses where this would work for than others?
I think it could work for, I think it depends on the angle on how you want to do it. Like, say if you're like, let me see if I can riff on one. Bank would be really hard because they have finance things. So
yeah, cool. Cool. So outside of the bigger ones, let's say accountant. Could an accountant use it, or like an electrician, or like an agency? You know, just like ourselves. Like, you know, like how would a service provider use it, or how would an e-commerce provider potentially use it? You know.
So I think for an agency, how it would work the best, like how you could kind of work with, like what you'd want to do, because what you're trying to do is you want to try to find clients, right? So like ideally as an agency, you're trying to find new business. So what I'd ask you then is, what's like the first thing when you're bringing clients on board? Like what's like the first thing they have you do more often than not? And then if there's something, whatever your quick win is there, that's your challenge. And you do it like that. And you do it like
understanding, for example, audiences. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, so doing the audience part,
it's like,
right?
It's you do like Rockstar Audience Challenge, and then you work with people through like, and like in 5 days you'll have the audience that will buy from you from like again and again and again. Boom, there it is, and you work them through that. Like I think trades and like electricians and those, they'd have a harder time with those types of things because it's more of like, hey, we're gonna do this. They want people. They don't want to train people as much. They want to do it for them. So anything that's completely done for you, I think agency work's the only one. Like digital agencies, it works for you. Well, creative agencies do too. They can work for this. I think this works. This would work like software. This will kill if you do. Like it'll just absolutely kill. It's a matter of what that does is it bridges that information gap that we talked about at the beginning, where info products have a way to talk with people all the time because they're always creating. A piece of software, anybody who signs up for a list has a half-life on there. How do you keep them engaged? Something like this.
Yeah, sure. Okay, that's cool. So the first one is challenge funnels, and check out the challenge funnel at the DM site. Of course, what else is performing right now? Like I saw some stuff on your Twitter or on your LinkedIn around conversational marketing. You got some stuff around say for example the push notifications, chatbots. Like is that all just kind of fancy stuff right now? Is it just kind of the old school? There's some ads with email, understanding
mostly the old school stuff works. Those are to me complementary things. I think having like my rule, like I have a really important rule when it comes to chatbots. It's if you're ever intending to hand off that chatbot to a human, make sure a human's available and make sure you make it absolutely clear. Like always let people know it's a bot. Don't try to fake people out. You're not going to pass the Turing test. Machines are dumb. You can never anticipate like what people are going to write in those things. It's insane. I thought I could because I'm like, hey, I'm smart, not that smart. So chatbots, I think are great on I think they're great on like product category pages when you have like a support chat. They're good on high ticket pages. They're great on thank you pages as well. They're great on like webinar playing pages. So like if you have a chatbot on there, if you're not using something like EverWebinar or anything like that, I do like those for that, but you also need to have people to man those things. Like I don't like using them for lead generation. I like when it was said like, oh yeah, like forms are dead. That's stupid. No, you need to be able to get people's information. One thing we've been testing out that's pretty cool. It's almost like premium low dollar content on our site. So we like block, like we use, we've been using a tool called MemberPress to do this on one of our new brands. where we have a certain membership level, but we use their short code to like block off key articles so they can start reading. So we almost take like a New York Times model to it. Like, hey, like, not like you've read too much, but we just kind of stop it. We're like, hey, become a member to read this type of thing. And that's worked really well for us. We took something from no MRR to like 20,000 MRR, just that.
Wow.
So kind of rethinking the
That's
model
great.
there, and that's at like $10 a month. So that's a significant number of people who signed up. That I've been really, one of the things that and it's not because it's a new thing, it's just because we haven't done it at DigitalMarketer enough, and I think people forget this part of the viral loop, so to say. And it's coming up with a solid word. Like I've been using UpViral a lot to mess with referral programs. They're awesome. And it goes back to whenever someone sends us like verified leads on that. I know like a lead's worth about $5 to me every time I get one. So that's just free leads at that point. So I can start really calculating that stuff out. So digging into referral programs that we've been basing off, that we use for our marketing newsletter. And newsletters obviously are like kind of the big thing right now. They're getting a little saturated. So if like you're not too late yet, especially if you're outside of the information space. But it is way saturated in ours. But like if you're like even in an e-com space or anything like that, if you have something interesting to talk about, something interesting to share, like people love valuable stuff coming to them. And then I think WhatsApp, there's some cool stuff going on with like WhatsApp newsletters. We don't do any of that. I've only heard. It's something I've like wanted to dig into, but that's definitely more of an outside the US thing. But like people have been looking at how to monetize their WhatsApp newsletters as well. And kind of that type of stuff. But that's something I can't speak to like at all. I'm just now thinking about the different types of, like, I'm thinking about the medium by which you can send a newsletter, because it's not like, I don't think newsletters are oversaturated yet, but I think them coming in email is starting to. I think if you can find a way to get to a different medium, it would still follow there. Like, what is it? There's, we don't use this, but in Austin, Texas, there's this like called like it's like, what are they called? They just sent me a text. It's called Nudge or something like that. And they nudge me to do, like, they're like, hey, this is the stuff happening this week. And they send me a text. I read it every time. So there's different ways to do like kind of like SMS marketing as well. That's starting to become more and more acceptable. I think it's more on the cutting edge still, like, and there's a lot more risk at that. And also asking for a phone number is like like people don't like giving their phone numbers up. But if you like marketed like hey, we're going to send you this, like sign up with just your like name and phone number. We're going to give you, like, you'll get a weekly text from us that's saying like XYZ things. Or if like you're going back even to your example of like an electrician or something like that, get like weekly electrician tips to your text inbox being like, hey, how to check a faulty thing. That'd be useful there. So really what we've been trying to do is find new channels to generate leads, and then new consumption channels for our media. That's where we've been spending a lot of our time.
Cool. So where are you most excited about in terms of the digital space in the next 2-3 years? Like, is there like an area where that's the thing which you're like excited about, or is it all kind of just the same, but just a bit more competitive and a bit faster?
I think it's going to get more competitive in the next 6 months. Like COVID made everybody remote, and everybody's looking for information. Everybody has the time to consume information. But it's also and I think information most of the time, and whenever you're building a media site or an information site or anything like that in the digital space, you're reacting to the technologies that are coming out. So I think what's exciting to me is just, I read like the Chief Martech blog and all that stuff to see what's hot and what's kind of going on. And then that's going to help me like think about, okay, where do I need to spend my time? Like in terms of investing my, like in learning new technologies or learning how things come together. And then also, is this something that's valuable for the company? I I think we're going to see some interesting tech innovations over the next 8 to 12 months in response to this now remote world. And I think what that's going to do is create a butt ton of innovation, of opportunity. And it's almost like it's going to create a lot of opportunity in the SaaS marketing world. I think the SaaS marketing world's boring, just completely boring. They're kind of like you've seen the e-com marketing world, like in the last couple of years, they've gotten really exciting in terms of how they understand brand voice and those types of things. SaaS doesn't have that. That's what's going to really shift. And I think it's going to be really cool to see how it does.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's what I think is going to happen because of just the influx of like need for information, the amount of information, and that information and those types of things is all is derived from technology and things that and need, that it's going to be a really, really cool landscape in the next next 6 to 12 months, I think.
So everything that we just spoke about is going to be even, it's going to be critically important, actually understanding the audience, understanding how to kind of assign some budgets, understanding actually how to track performance of the funnel, and understanding actually how do you actually improve the performance. And don't just think about A/B testing and so on, right? Because that's not going to be enough like in such a world that we live in. A few quick fire questions, right?
All right.
If you had to choose just one channel or tactic for growth, then what would it be?
Shit.
If you had to choose, brother, you got to choose one. What would it be?
I still would use kind of Facebook ads and content. Like you can build a lot of stuff with that. It'd be kind of like the 1-2 punch of Facebook ads for lead generation, email for kicking in, like that just works.
Cool. So what book has had the biggest impact on your success? If you can pick one.
It's not so I don't read that many marketing books. I read a few.
It doesn't have to be around marketing. It's just based on any book.
So there's this book called the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus by Ludwig Wittgenstein. I read it when I was in college, and I did a whole seminar on the guy. Unbelievable thinker. As much as I talk, I never learned one lesson from him, that like brevity is what's most important. He has a foreword in the book that's like, what is said, what is not a mere utterance, but it can be said in 3 words. He really changed how I think about things systematically. He was my entrance into kind of like more advanced kind of mathematics and those types of things as well. So unbelievable thinker, genius, troubled. There's also another great book about him, if anybody's familiar. It's called The Duty of Genius. It's by Ray Monk. It was kind of the first time I saw, like, you got to see the man behind the genius too. Wow. Which really kind of, you see the juxtaposition of like people aren't this just idea, they are people. And I think between those two, it's just fantastic.
Awesome, man. I'm going to have to listen to that segment again so I can figure out how to spell it. But thank you, Google, for
exactly
auto suggest. Yeah, it's going to be great. Cool. So what's your number one piece of advice for hiring awesome people?
For hiring awesome people, it comes down to culture. Like, will you like working with the person? Talent is incredibly important, but I had a candidate when we were hiring for a paid media role that I was like, I want to hire this guy, I'll hire him right now. But we had a process to make sure to like check culture, they'd meet with the team. I would like, everyone was like, no. And it would have been a train wreck. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously talent and those things are important, but it's like, can you work with the person? Because you spend way more, like you spend so much time with people.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I like the process there. Yeah. Like you have to actually meet kind of other people in the company, right? That's a part of the process. That's great. How do you relax after a crazy day in the office, which is now home office, but I guess
which is now home.
Outside the office, but like, how do you relax?
So I'm almost embarrassingly good at the NHL video game franchise. It's a good way for me to chill out. It's that, and then now my new hobby of boating, which is like, I feel like kind of lame saying that, because it's like such a, ooh, look at me and how much I do boating and things. Like I feel like crappy about that, but it is how I spend most of my time if I'm not at work.
That's awesome. And you are like a hockey fan, and you've had
Oh yeah,
a version of the
right
Bruins
now.
hat. Yeah, like of that hat since I met you. And I think you gave me one year, and
I did.
Like I had it. It was the B. So like I know the Bruins. I don't know many kind of hockey teams, but that's one of them. Cool. So what's your best tip for time management or productivity?
Do chunks on your calendar and actually put them in it. So like my calendar is covered in just like I have things that just even say focus block on it, which at the beginning of the week I fill in what those focus blocks are going to be, so it just doesn't stay that way. But all standing meetings, all other things, like you can have things like I don't go to this level where it's like check email and those things. Like I should, because that'll get you kind of pulling off of Slack and email as well. But I thought it was the lamest thing in the world to do that stuff with calendars. But oh my gosh, it protects your time so much from other people. And then you just kind of know. So that's the big one there.
And that's what I do as well, by the way. And that's an awesome one. And then I make it private so people can't tell that like it's a fake meeting. You know,
exactly.
They're like, oh, that's your focus time. That's fine. Let's have a meeting in that time. No problem. Like, no.
Yeah.
Private.
Exactly.
What's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
I think it just comes back down to what I said when we were talking about attribution. Do you have more money at the end of the month than you do at the beginning? And looking at it that like there's one sort, like that's the one source of truth when you're looking at the effectiveness of something. Don't get blinded by like all the like bells and whistles that exist out there. Like, are you grow? You'll know if you're growing and if you're not. There's going to be no surprises down the line at that point. And also pay your taxes. That one too.
Thank you, IRS or ATO, or you know whoever is the tax authority in your country. We love you. Sorry, everything. Nah, just kidding. And I think you may have already answered this, but I still want to ask it. So what do you do for fun?
So I play music. I've been playing the bass guitar since I was in 7th grade. I like to go to concerts. I love karaoke. Like, love it. That's the first thing I'm doing once I'm allowed to go places again. But also, like, it's going to change karaoke forever because, like, I don't want to share the microphone with somebody now. Like, to be fair, I never wanted to share the stage with anybody else, but let alone a microphone. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And then kind of some of the stuff I talked about earlier, just kind of like hockey, like watching hockey, like video games. Yeah. Just overall fun guy.
Yeah, no, actually, and I can confirm that. That's how we met. We had a lot of fun. And yeah, we're similar in terms of how we think about life. So like if somebody wants to get kind of in touch with you, how do they do that?
LinkedIn is an easy one. Twitter, I don't really look at all that much. Like, my email is justin@digitalmarketer.com. Like, if anyone wants to reach out, that'd be awesome. Yeah. But those are just kind of the best ways to do it.
Cool. Justin, mate, thank you so much for taking the time this evening. I wish I could have had a scotch with you, or whatever you're drinking right now. It looks like scotch. It could be bourbon.
It's bourbon.
Whiskey.
It's bourbon.
It's bourbon.
It's
bourbon. Hey, look, it's been so good to speak to you about all of the geek stuff that we love. And just thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
No, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Thanks for listening to the Growth Manifesto podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please head on over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. For more episodes, please visit growthmanifesto.com/podcast.